the risk we would take by not doing this is far greater than if we're wrong. So if we spend $100 billion and AI ends up not delivering value and we don't ever get close to AGI and this was all just a bubble, who cares? Like it's insignificant. Welcome to the Artificial Intelligence Show, the podcast that helps your business grow smarter by making AI approachable and actionable. My name is Paul Roetzer. I'm the founder and CEO of Marketing AI Institute, and I'm your host. Each week, I'm joined by my co-host and Marketing AI Institute Chief Content Officer, Mike Kaput, as we break down all the AI news that matters and give you insights and perspectives that you can use to advance your company and your career. Join us as we accelerate AI literacy for all. Welcome to episode 107 of the Artificial Intelligence Show. I'm your host, Paul Roetzer, along with my co-host, Mike Kaput. We are recording this on July 29th, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. I think that timestamp may be important this week because after last week, I feel like we're just kind of entering the busy season here. This week's interesting. So there was some big announcements, big news items, but in prepping for the podcast today, there's like the first 4 or 5 topics are all very significant. And I think it's very macro level significant. And what we try really hard to do on this show is take these macro level topics and break them down so they make sense. So business leaders, marketers, entrepreneurs, educators, people who listen to this show regularly, we try and make this stuff mean something to you. So on the surface, an article about, $1 trillion in data centers doesn't sound that interesting to a marketer, but as we will explain today, all of this is connected. So this is one where I woke up on a Monday morning early and you start prepping for this show. I'm like, oh man, I need that 3rd cup of coffee today. This is a lot. So we got a ton to talk about. Mike's done a great job, as always, curating the stuff into the main topic, rapid fire items. But we got a lot to go through. So I'll do the quick intro up front. Today's episode is brought to us by MAICON, our Marketing AI Conference, the 5th annual Marketing AI Conference. It's going to be happening in Cleveland, September 10th to the 12th. There are more than 60 sessions, including keynotes from Mike Walsh, the author of the Algorithmic Leader, my friend and world-renowned marketing speaker, Andrew Davis, Liz Grennan, partner at Quantum Black, AI by McKinsey, and dozens of other incredible speakers. So still got time. There's about 43 days until the event, I think. I saw a countdown recently. So if you're thinking about joining us, we've got a promo code for you, POD200. That's POD 200. That'll get you $200 off any pass you choose. From just a straight main conference to an all access with workshops. Mike and I are both running half-day workshops on September 10th. So when you register, you can join one of those workshops. Jim Stern's also doing a workshop. So we have amazing workshops and then just the 2 days of incredible sessions. Again, over 60 sessions focused on both applied AI and strategic AI. So big picture stuff. So go to maicon.ai. That's MAICON.ai. and click register to use your POD 200 code at checkout. All right, Mike, we talked a little bit about Llama 3.1 last week. It was rumored it was coming out. It did. And that is our lead topic today.
Absolutely. So yeah, last week we talked about how Meta had been talking about, or it had leaked that it was going to release Llama 3.1. It indeed has done that, which is its latest and most advanced open large language model. Now, Llama 3.1 405B has 405 billion parameters. It's touted as the world's largest and most capable openly available foundation model. And Meta says that it, quote, rivals the top AI models when it comes to state-of-the-art capabilities in general knowledge, steerability, math, tool use, and multilingual translation. This model also has an expanded 128K token context window and improved support for 8 languages. Now, interestingly, training Llama 3.1 405B involved significant technical challenges. They used over 16,000 H100 GPUs and processed more than 15 trillion tokens during training. So importantly, and we'll talk about this in a little bit here, Meta has also said that in addition to just being a generally open and powerful large language model, that Llama 3.145B is also going to open up new applications like, quote, synthetic data generation to enable the improvement and training of smaller models. So remember that point as we get a little deeper into this conversation. But before we get into that, Paul, I want to first cover the basics. Maybe can you talk us through at a high level what's so significant about this model's capabilities? And I think in the process, if we can, it would be helpful to clarify what Meta means when they call this model, let's say, quote, open or quote, open source, because they're using that, I believe, in a little different way than maybe typically it's been used.
I think that they've just decided that they're going to define open source as what they're doing. So you do get a lot of arguments about this. And it actually reminds me, 7, 8 years ago when the traditionalist AI researchers, wanted to control the definition of AI, and they just sort of like lost the control of that.
Mm.
And it just became what we believe it to be today. I feel like open source is very quickly heading in this direction. So I think traditionalists from an open source perspective feel like the data should be shared as well, the data that was used to train on it. You're not going to get that. Like as we will learn with Runway in a minute, like there are a number of reasons why these companies, even the supposed open companies, are not sharing the data used to train these models. As some competitive, some because they're stealing copyrighted material and don't want to admit to it yet. There's a lot of reasons, I guess, but they are very clearly considering what they're doing open source. Whether traditionalists want them to call it that or not, it is going to be known as that, and that just means they're sharing the weights of the model. Basically, they're sharing the technical details of how it was trained, what the weights were. Meta goes into great detail about the technical infrastructure used to train the models.
Mhm.
So they're being very open. They're just not sharing the training data.
So maybe talk to me about the bigger picture implications of a model of this size and power that is open. Like you had written this past week on LinkedIn, kind of as part of an in-depth breakdown, you said that Zuckerberg has made the strategic decision to spend tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars in coming years to commoditize the frontier model market and undercut the core revenue channels for the major closed model companies. So like, can you unpack what you're talking about there and why this is such a big deal in that context?
Yeah, I'll go into like 3 aspects here that I think are really relevant. So the first is Zuckerberg's letter that came out on Tuesday when they released the model that is really a manifesto for open source.
Mhm.
And since we talk so much on the show about open versus closed models, and that there's really there's no clear path forward as to like what wins, but this is kind of the battle that we're in. The second component I want to talk about is the fact that much larger models are coming soon. As big as this is child's play compared to what's going to be coming in the next 12 to 18 months. And then I'll kind of wrap my thoughts with some additional context from that LinkedIn post you mentioned. So Zuckerberg's letter, which I would recommend people read, if you're interested in this thread of AI and you want to understand the bigger stuff that's going on here, he published a letter called "Open Source AI is the Path Forward." He leads with an analogy of Linux, an open source operating system, as an argument for the future being open versus closed. He uses this Linux analogy in every interview he does. Like this is his main argument. So his premise is that what Linux did and what open source AI will do is makes things more affordable. And over time, things become more advanced, more secure, because there's a broader ecosystem of people, developers working within these models and developing its capabilities. But he also says very early on in his letter, starting next year, we expect future Llama models to become the most advanced in the industry. But even before that, Llama is already leading on openness, modifiability, and cost efficiency. I believe he's previously acknowledged Llama 4 was already in training, and I'll come back to that in a minute. They announced in Zuck's letter, widespread distribution was already in place. So with the launch, all major cloud companies, including AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google, Oracle, and more, you can access this model through them. You can get it through Perplexity already. I'm pretty sure you can actually choose 3.1 to be your model. They also said, Zuckerberg said, companies like Scale AI, Dell, Deloitte, and others are ready to help enterprises adopt Llama and train custom models with their own data. This is a huge play for them, is to work with these service provider companies who can actually go in and build these fine-tuned models for enterprises. He went on to say Meta is committed to open source AI. He outlined why he believes open source is the best development stack, why open sourcing Llama is good for Meta, and why open source AI is good for the world. And then this really becomes the focus of the letter and makes his case for the future. So I think it's important to go through these, not just because Zuck is saying it, but this is very clearly, as I already alluded to, a manifesto for open source. So this is putting a stake in the ground for anyone who wants to push this idea of open source being key to the future. This letter can be used as a basis for that. So I'll just kind of hit some of his key points. So the first is why open source is good for developers, and then in turn good for brands and businesses and enterprises who can work with these developers to build these models. He says we need to train, fine tune, and distill our own models. Every organization, meaning versus closed, like buying OpenAI's closed model or Google's Gemini, for example. So you need to train, fine tune, and distill our own models, speaking as brands. Every organization has different needs that are best met with models of different sizes that are trained and fine tuned with their specific data. On-device tasks and classification tasks require smaller models, while more complicated tasks require larger models. Next, he said we need to control our destiny and not get locked into a closed vendor. It's taking a shot at OpenAI, obviously. A lot of this directly or indirectly is against OpenAI, and then he directly goes at Apple as well. Says we need to protect our data. Many organizations handle sensitive data, and they need to it's secure and can't send to closed models over cloud APIs. We've definitely heard that from enterprises we talk to. We need a model that is more efficient and affordable to run. Developers can run inference on Llama. Again, inference is at the moment when you actually use the model, the output it's giving you, not the training of the model itself. And that this enables it to be, bigger and faster. So now why is it good for Meta? Everyone's always saying, like, why would you give this away? You're spending billions of dollars on infrastructure and then training these models and running them. Why are you giving this away? So he says we have to ensure not locking into a competitor's closed ecosystem where they can restrict what we build. This leads into his comments on Apple. And he talks about this in interviews all the time. One of my formative experiences has been building our services constrained by what Apple will let us build on their platforms. Between the way they tax developers, which I think like 40% or something of every app sale goes to Apple, the arbitrary rules they apply, and all the product innovations they block from shipping, it's clear that Meta and many other companies would be freed up to build much better services. Now, this, I thought was interesting. And again, I listened to the interview he did where he talked about this. And I think this alludes to they're going to go insanely hard at glasses, like these Ray-Ban glasses they have, and like Project Astra that we saw from Google, like a preview. I could see them spending billions on that in the next like 18 to 24 months, because what he wants to do is create a new operating system. And it actually probably explains why he spent 10 billion on trying to create the metaverse over the last, decade or so. It's because he's trying to get off of the iPhone. He built his apps within a controlled ecosystem by someone else that dictates to him and Meta what they can and can't do, and he doesn't want that in the future. So metaverse was his first play to get around that. His second play is now to build glasses, most likely, and then to build their own language models, build their own intelligence into those devices that no longer require Apple. So that's why they invested and bought Oculus and tried to build the metaverse through Oculus. Now they'll try and do it through these other devices. So again, he didn't say that explicitly, but that is absolutely what he's implying here. He also said he expects AI development will continue to be very competitive, which means that open sourcing any given model isn't giving away a massive advantage over the next best models at that point. The path for Llama to become the industry standard is being consistently competitive, efficient, and open generation after generation. This one actually goes to one of the points I'll finish with in my LinkedIn post, because he validated exactly what I was thinking there. And then he says a key difference between meta and closed models is that selling access to AI models isn't our business. That means openly releasing Llama doesn't undercut our revenue, sustainability, or ability to invest in research like it does for closed providers, meaning they're not making their money on, selling the models for $20 a month or the cloud services for, for everything to be hosted. And then he did say, and this was a direct shot at regulatory capture from OpenAI and Gemini, this is one reason several closed providers consistently lobby governments against open source. And then the final notes from his letter, why open source is good for the world. Says AI has more potential than any modern technology to increase human productivity, creativity, and quality of life, and to accelerate economic growth while unlocking progress in medical and scientific research. He also says there's an ongoing debate about the safety of open source AI models. And in my view is that open source AI will be safer than the alternatives. He also says my framework for understanding safety is that we need to protect against two categories of harm, unintentional and intentional. Now, some people may roll their eyes at this point because the whole idea that we're entrusting Zuckerberg and Facebook, of all people, with security and safety, when they certainly have a questionable history of how they have used data and how that their products have impacted people. So that all being aside, The Ugly Truth, is that the book about Facebook? I think I read a few years ago. I'll look on it when Mike's talking next. But there was a book probably about 3 or 4 years ago that told kind of a rather unsavory history of Facebook. But anyway, so then he goes on to say open source should be significantly safer since the systems are more transparent and can be widely scrutinized. Historically, open source software has been more secure. So my feeling here is should be significantly safer is doing a lot of work. I don't know that this will stay true, and he has not committed to all future models being open source. Like he has said in interviews, there may come a point where this isn't it. And even, when they first announced 405B a few months ago, they didn't say it was going to be open source. Like, I don't know that they were sure yet if it was safe to do it. And I do think that's probably why we haven't seen GPT-5 yet. I don't know that they've managed to make it safe enough yet to release it. So I do think that there's a time where Meta changes direction here and does not open source future models, but he maybe leaves it open to that. And then he goes into just some government stuff. So then he ends with the bottom line is that open source AI represents the world's best shot at harnessing this technology to create the greatest economic opportunity and security for everyone. So if you're for or against open source, or if you're neutral on the topic, go read the full article. It's very helpful. The second point I wanted to make, and that he alludes to, is much bigger models are coming very soon. So they trained Llama 3.1 405B on 16,000 H100s from NVIDIA. It's about 480 million in chips, not the cost to do the training, but just the infrastructure, roughly. They don't know the final price of these things, but roughly $30,000 per chip. In March of this year, Meta announced that they had created two 24,000 GPU clusters that were being trained to use Llama 3. So this is only 16K of 48,000 that they already acknowledged was for Llama 3 specifically. So they didn't even train this on the most powerful structures they had already in place. They also at that time said that by the end of 2024, we're aiming to continue to grow our infrastructure build out that will include 350,000 NVIDIA H100 GPUs as part of our portfolio that will feature compute power equivalent to nearly 600,000 H100s. So again, Llama 3.1 405B, which in some ways is on par with the most powerful language model in the world, was trained on 16,000. They plan to have 600,000 by the end of this year. 600,000 equivalent H100s, which I think they're counting for the new Blackwell chip, the B200 in there, because that'll be, 5, 10, 20 times more powerful than the H100s. That's $18 billion in chips. That's not the data centers and the training. That's just the chips they're buying from NVIDIA. So they're planning on having 600,000. We know XAI is going to, claim to have 100,000 by the end of the year. Who knows how many OpenAI has? Like, they are very good at keeping that a secret.
Yeah.
The rumors are that GPT-4 was trained on 25,000 A100s, which is a previous generation of NVIDIA. So probably the equivalent of, 10,000 GPUs or H100s, let's say. So we're like, we know all the frontier model companies have hundreds of thousands more GPUs than they've used to train the versions we currently have. And so as long as these things keep getting smarter, the more data they're given, the more GPUs they're given, the more time, we're heading toward this massive leap forward.
Hmm.
Now, this doesn't even account for the fact that these are just large language models. Like Jan LeCun, the chief scientist and what is his title? Executive vice president or something of AI. So he's the chief AI scientist and an EVP at Meta. He doesn't even think language models are the path to intelligence. So like all this spending and stuff isn't even what he envisions being the path to true intelligence. So with that being said, I will wrap up my thoughts on this section with what I posted on LinkedIn, because this is what I find myself thinking about all the time. Okay. So Meta released Llama 3.1 405B. Early reports are that it is very impressive, very powerful, and most importantly, open source. The excerpt you read already. In essence, Zuckerberg has made the strategic decision to spend tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars in the coming years to commoditize the frontier model market and undercut the core revenue channels for Anthropic and OpenAI and the emerging market potential for Google, Microsoft, Amazon by giving the technology away. Why? Because he can. They are printing money without a cloud or enterprise software business. They don't need the AI models to grow their revenue. They can just infuse their AI into their existing social networks, which I believe is about 4 billion people or so have Microsoft, or not Microsoft, have Meta applications like WhatsApp and Instagram and Facebook. And their future, AR glasses, metaverse, whatever it is, cash cows, and attempt to dominate the AI model market by winning with developers. This drives innovation and makes them look like the Robin Hood of AI. But here's what I can't stop thinking about. How big of a leap will GPT-5, or whatever they name it, be when it finally launches this year? GPT-4 was released in March 2023. That's 17 months ago, which in AI timelines is a lifetime. It's taken this long for all of these other companies who have been spending billions of dollars on research and development, talent, GPUs, and training to create comparable models to GPT-4 and GPT-4o, the GPT-4 class of models, we'll say. In nearly 1.5 years, no one has built a definitively better model, but everyone seems to have caught up, which takes me back to GPT-5. OpenAI knows their competitors are already working on bigger, more generally capable multimodal models, as well as smaller, more efficient models. Meta is training Llama 4. xAI is training Grok 2 and Grok 3 that we talked about on episode 106. Anthropic is probably training Claude 4. Google is probably training Gemini 2. So does OpenAI just build a model that gets surpassed 3 months later by the next frontier model, as Zuckerberg proposes in his letter? Or do they release something that sets the standard that everyone chases for 1 to 2 years again? And if they do, what are the breakthroughs that would need to be achieved in order to give them the pole position in the pursuit of AGI? In short, and this is really critical here, have AI frontier models been commoditized, as Zuckerberg would present that they are, and the future is simply continuous parallel innovations across leading labs? Or does OpenAI still have an unknown competitive advantage that gives them a unique ability to build the most advanced models possible? I guess only time will tell, but I don't think we'll have to wait long to find out. So I think this is the critical thing. And again, I'll kind of read that line again, because I think this is the foundation of it all. Have AI frontier models been commoditized, and the future is simply continuous parallel innovations across leading labs? Or does OpenAI or Google, with their new math product that we're going to talk about, has someone found a breakthrough, or will Meta be the one to unlock with Jan LeCun, that actually leapfrogs everybody and they can't catch up for a couple of years? And we don't know the answer to this. Zuckerberg seems to be on the path of, yeah, it's just basically parallel innovation. And all these researchers are jumping lab, and they're just taking the innovation with them and giving it to the other lab. And everybody's just going to keep, like, every 3 to 6 months one-upping each other, and there's going to be no definitive, most powerful model in the world. I don't know if I believe that, but that's what they're presenting.
So as kind of a coda to this topic, just really quickly, could you maybe talk a little bit, just kind of in a near-term practical sense, about this whole thing they're talking about using synthetic data to train smaller models, and like why that's an important kind of near-term piece here?
Well, so the one concern people have is we run out of data, that there's only so much data in the world that's publicly available on the internet, whether it's, audio files, video files, text files, images, whatever it may be, that at some point they run out of data to give these models and they need to create new data. And so by creating these bigger models, those models can create new data that's derivatives of human intelligence. And then that data can be used to train the models. And research is sort of conflicted at the moment on whether or not this will actually work. And as you scale up this synthetic data, does it actually start to break down? So we don't know, but like I know Anthropic is very big on this. I believe OpenAI is like, a lot of the research labs seem to think that there is definitely a path forward for this where synthetic data becomes the primary training data.
And so, kind of the core thesis here is you give these models more compute and more data. And so far, they appear to get smarter. And we just talked about all the chips. Clearly, we've got a long runway of more compute to give them. So, if you can crack the code on the data piece of this, it seems like we could be in for some significant improvement.
That is the assumption.
All right. So, our second big topic this week is that AI video generation company Runway has come under some not great scrutiny for using YouTube videos without permission to train its new model, Gen 3. According to an internal spreadsheet that was obtained by 404 Media, the company trained this model by scraping thousands of videos without permission from different sources, including popular YouTube creators and brands, as well as pirated films. So overall, this leaked document kind of portrays a company-wide effort to collect training data from unauthorized sources. So this obviously raises pretty significant questions about the ethics and legality of Runway's data collection practices. I mean, they're a giant in their space of the industry. They've raised $141 million from investors that include Google, which owns YouTube. Companies like NVIDIA, they've got a $1.5 billion valuation. And this comes on the heels of stories about companies like Apple, Salesforce, Anthropic doing the same thing using YouTube videos to some degree, which we did cover a bit on last week's episode. So, Paul, first up, like, what's going on here? Is this as bad as it seems? It certainly seems like one of the more extensive exposés on this practice, though obviously Runway's not the only one doing it.
So this is, I think I called it on LinkedIn when I posted about it, like the uncomfortable part of all of this is we love these tools. Like we love Runway. I've been using Runway for 5 years. I know how it's trained. Like this isn't a surprise to me. I know how SOAR is trained. Like, so I think what's happening now is because generative AI has become so mainstream that there's more awareness now outside of the AI research of how this all this isn't even the ugly stuff. Like this is like table stakes, how everyone is doing this. So basic premise here, and I would suggest reading the article because if you don't understand how these models are trained, this is really illustrative of how it works. In essence, what they do is they say like, okay, we want to make sure this model is really good at like drone footage, that it can like follow a car on the road and create like a view. So someone goes and searches YouTube to find 20 videos of a drone following a car on the road. And then they basically take those videos that someone has a copyright to, and they train their model on it. And then you can go in and the model all of a sudden has this amazing ability to like give a drone view. Well, it's because they use somebody's data for it. There's examples where they had specific YouTubers, like influencers who pay money to like travel places and film things in specific ways and style. And you could go in and give Runway that influencer's name and just like the name and say video, like say Mike Kaput video, and it would generate a video that looks almost exactly like an actual YouTube video from that person because they didn't red team it out of it. So what they do is they train it on all this copyrighted data. And so these things learn to emulate what it sees, create videos that look almost exactly what it sees. But what they then do is they go in and put in restrictions. So if you say a Pixar-like movie, it won't create it because they know they'll get sued by Pixar. So they strip the stuff out for the big brands so that if you keyword search for it, it's trained not to output that so that when their lawyers go and check it, they don't find stuff. Doesn't mean it's not capable of doing it. It's 100% capable of doing it because they trained it on Pixar movies or shorts and Disney movies and everything. And so this is how this works. These things have to learn from something, so they learn from human creativity. Now, the argument of the lawyers is that's how humans learn. So like if I wanted to learn how to shoot something like Mike Kaput's YouTube channel, I'm going to go study Mike's YouTube channel, and then I'm going to use Mike's style as an influence for what I create. So that's going to be the argument of the lawyers on the side of them. Now, the catch for all of this, and the weird part is, why don't they just admit it? Like, we know that they're doing it. Everyone knows they're doing it. But yet, when like OpenAI was specifically asked, how is Sora trained? And the CTO just dodged it. Like, I'm not sure if it was use YouTube videos. Yeah, you are. Like, and we know you are. But Google knows all this too. And it's against the terms of use for YouTube videos to be downloaded and used to train models. And yet Google knows people are doing it. YouTube's aware of this. They're not stopping anybody because they probably did it too. And so it's just this really weird thing. And so I'd put some comments about this on LinkedIn, and a friend of mine, Sharon Torek, who's an IP attorney, actually commented. So I'll share her perspective as an IP attorney. She says, big AI is rolling the dice that they will be too big to fail by the time a high court determines that their use of copyrighted works to train their models is unlawful, if one does. To me, again, this is Sharon's words, the lack of transparency about their training practices is telling. Of course, they're privately owned entities who are protecting their assets and shareholders, and slowing down isn't a practical option for them. My view is that they're moving forward until IP owners will probably have to make licensing deals with them to protect and monetize their works. And then someone commented, and then she replied to that one and said, many rights holders won't have the resources to prove damages. Others that do, like big entertainment IP owners, will make the business decision to license rather than deal with the infringement. So we all know it's unethical. We all know it's probably illegal. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a better business decision for these big companies to just accept that it was done and this is what happens, and just make a deal and try and make money in the process rather than trying to sue them and prove damages. Now, the alternative opinion, which was provided by a friend of mine, Brad Reynolds, who's the chief strategy officer and senior vice president of AI at Expedient, which is a data center and cloud service provider, he said, not a lawyer here, but there's plenty of there's a pretty famous case of HiQ versus LinkedIn. HiQ was a data analytics company that scraped a bunch of public LinkedIn and used it in their tool, but not as exact copies. The case, after much expensive legal investment by both sides, was determined that if the info was public and used in a transformative way, LinkedIn had no claim. It would be different if it was behind some sort of user registration that requires you to log in and agree to terms and conditions. But once you post it in a public space, it is free for others to consume, assuming they don't just copy and paste it and claim it as their own, which is where the transformative nature comes in. In terms of large language models and transformative, I would say where in Llama 3 source code can you find the exact content? So he's saying like it's transformative. In terms of why they are cagey in our extremely litigious culture, and one in which the loser has no downside other than time invested, even a small probability of success will incent a certain set of lawyers to roll the dice on a class action lawsuit. Giving those folks extra ammunition, if only on a 5% roll, is dangerous because it can cause a lot of operational distraction. So in essence, like, this is kind of the tech side of this, is they're just rolling the dice, and the IP attorney side is basically kind of similar. And at some point, someone's got to decide that they want to take down this industry. Like, was it Peter Thiel who took down like the media company?
Gawker,
like, yeah, someone needs to decide, like, I'm willing to spend $100 billion on this. Like, I'm taking down these foundation models. And if that happens, then it's going to be a really interesting time. But I still err on the side of what Sharon is saying, and this is what I've said all along. I just feel like at some point this is going to become the norm. People will talk more openly about how they've been doing it, and licensing deals will be struck. And unfortunately, it's the small creators, the innovators, who won't have a say in any of this and aren't going to make any money as a result of it. And I don't hear anybody solving for that.
All right. So in our third big topic we want to cover this week is really trying to kind of pick apart an answer to the following question, which people are increasingly asking, which is there an AI bubble? So this is increasingly on the minds of AI watchers, as even the most successful AI companies appear to be losing eye-watering amounts of money. And generative AI companies as a whole are kind of jockeying to figure out sustainable, profitable business models. The highest profile example of this is OpenAI, which, despite its popularity and prominence, could be facing staggering losses of up to $5 billion this year, according to a recent analysis by The Information. Now, this is based on previously undisclosed internal financial data and insights from individuals close to the business. And their analysis reveals just these enormous costs that are associated with developing and running large language models. Like, for instance, OpenAI's AI training and inference costs could reach $7 billion in 2024. That's roughly $4 billion dedicated to running ChatGPT and $3 billion for training new model. There's an estimated $1.5 billion in staffing costs for its growing workforce of about 1,500 employees. So their total kind of operating costs could soar to $8.5 billion, according to The Information. But they are on track to generate $2 billion annually. Their total revenue for the year is projected, with some additional income coming in from API services, to maybe land between 3.5 and 4.5 billion. So that's kind of where they're getting this 5 billion number, which leaves OpenAI losing anywhere from 4 to 5 billion this year. They're not the only one doing this. There's other leading companies like Anthropic that are burning through cash. The Information also estimates they're burning about 2.7 billion this year. And they estimate they only have about 1/10 to 1/5 the revenue of OpenAI. Now, Paul, that sounds dire, but there's actually probably some more going on here, because people are definitely tempted to pile on when they read stories like this, because they can validate what plenty of people believe or want to believe about generative AI, that, it's overhyped, overvalued, no real use cases or business models. But you and I have kind of talked offline about how there's more to the story here. Can you kind of zoom us out and put into perspective for us what's going on here?
Yeah, as crazy as it sounds to most business leaders, maybe most people who would listen to this podcast, losing 5 billion or more in a year is insignificant.
Mhm.
Like, in the grand scheme of what they're pursuing, the market potential they're pursuing, 5 billion is nothing. I mean, we just talked about the GPU, the cost of GPUs, like 18 billion is what Meta's spending just on the GPUs, like not even the training and the inference and everything else.
Hmm.
So 5 billion is nothing. I don't know off the top of my head the R&D budgets of NVIDIA and Google. Maybe you could find it real quick, Mike, but I want to say it's like 50 billion a year, like something like that. I mean, they're not spending insignificant amounts of money taking shots at future earnings. So relatively not a lot of money. Now, are we in a bubble? Maybe. Like, nobody really knows, but I'm 100% confident that these superscalers are just getting started on the spending. So I saw a great tweet from, let's see, who's this from? Doug Clinton. So he is with Deepwater Management and Investment Firm, at Doug Clinton on Twitter. And he shared this like really cool visual of what he was calling a Pascalian wager. So I had to look up who Blaise Pascal was, but basically a 17th century French philosopher, mathematician, and physicist. And in the 1600s, he suggested that people make a life-defining gamble when deciding whether or not to believe in God. And so it creates basically this grid, like the four squares. And the argument is based on the idea that if God exists, then believing in him is infinitely beneficial. But if he doesn't, then the loss is finite for both believers and non-believers. So Pascal believed that since it's impossible to prove or disprove God's existence, it's better to bet that God does and live accordingly. And so he took this basic premise and he put it into a grid of, is AI profound or not, basically. And so again, it's like, it's a really great one to go look at. But basically in the grid, he says AI is overblown. So let's say that these superscalers like Amazon and Microsoft and OpenAI and Google believe AI is profound, but it ends up being overblown. His point there is, well, who cares? You waste hundreds of billions of dollars on AI infrastructure that you can eventually use for something else anyway. So you don't really like lose anything if you get it wrong. Then there's AI is overblown belief, or AI is actually overblown, and then there's the belief it's overblown, and he says lame rewards, save wasting hundreds of billions of dollars on AI infrastructure. So you decide, we're just not going to do it. Like it's not worth it. We're not going to try and compete. And so you save a couple $100 billion over the next 5-10 years, but then you have no potential to unlock the $1 trillion plus market. So that's the like AI ends up being overblown argument. AI ends up being profound. So if AI is profound and you believe it, he calls it heaven. You capture hundreds of billions in incremental annual revenue because you were willing to spend the money now to do it. AI ends up being profound and you don't do anything about it. Well, now you're in hell. You lose significant ground to competition, maybe no longer a mega cap company. So in essence, what they're saying, which then gets played out in comments made this past week by Sundar Pichai and Mark Zuckerberg. So David Kahn, who is with Sequoia, tweeted, Google and Meta CEOs both in the last 24 hours now agreeing with my AI arms race narrative, which was based on something else he'd written. There are 4 major players in the game theory problem, and 2 are now on the record about their strategies. What he calls out. So he says Google and Meta CEOs gave the same answer yesterday when asked about the disconnect between aggressive AI capital expenditure spending and lack of revenue monetization. So here we go. $5 billion lost to OpenAI, and they're not realizing the money back yet. So here's why they're doing it. So Google CEO Sundar Pichai spoke on the earnings call and said, quote, the risk of underinvesting is dramatically greater than the risk of overinvesting. Overinvesting scenarios still leave you with infrastructure that has a long, useful life that you can apply across the business and work through, while not investing to be at the frontier has more significant downside. So basically, the risk we would take by not doing this is far greater than if we're wrong. So if we spend $100 billion and AI ends up not delivering value and we don't ever get close to AGI and this was all just a bubble, who cares? Like it's insignificant. And then Zuckerberg said basically the same thing. So AI will be fundamental if products are able to grow massively over the next few years, which I think there's a very good chance of. I'd much rather overinvest and play for that outcome than save money by developing more slowly. He acknowledges a meaningful chance a lot of companies are overbuilding now and will look back and they've spent some number of billions more than they had to, but they're all making rational decisions because the downside being behind leaves you out of position for the most important technology over the next 10 to 15 years. And so I would connect this back to your own business. Like if you're sitting on the sidelines waiting to see if AI will be profound or not, you've lost. Like you will lose. Like, so you're basically betting it's not going to be profound. But if your competitors are betting it's going to be profound and they're willing to invest in the infrastructure and upskill their talent and, figure AI out, pilot and scale it, you're going to have no chance. And so that's where I think a lot of this comes down to is like, where are we really in the adoption curve, the understanding curve, and is it going to play out the way people think it is? And I just wouldn't want to be on the side that's betting it's not going to be profound when it comes to a business standpoint. Then there was one other article we'll link to. This is from The Economist, I believe. I had this. Let me double check this source. So this is The Economist, and it's called What Are the Threats to the $1 trillion Artificial Boom? So in this, it talks about, it says Alphabet's capital spending is expected to grow by about half this year. This is on AI to $48 billion. Much will be spent on AI-related gear. So this is basically talking about the infrastructure layer, where all this is going. Estimates that Alphabet, Amazon, Meta, and Microsoft will together splurge $104 billion on building AI data centers this year. Add in spending by smaller tech firms and other industries, and the total AI data center binge between 2023 and 2027 could reach 1.4 trillion. So to understand where the market is going, you have to follow the supply chain. You got to look not just at those major players, but where else is it coming from? So in this article, it says AI investment can broadly be split into 2. Half goes to chip makers like NVIDIA. The rest is spent on equipment that keeps the chips whirring, ranging from networking gear to cooling systems. The Economist looked at 60 such companies. So again, a really cool analysis if you want to understand this a little deeper. It is forecast to sell, let's see, chips. Oh, like for example, Eaton, which is actually about 30 minutes from our home in Cleveland. Like it's a Cleveland-based company. Says an American maker of industrial machinery said that in the past year, it has saw more than a 4-fold increase in customer inquiries related to AI data center products. So basically, we're at this point where everyone is betting that AI will be profound, from the suppliers to wherever. And if you want to get a sense of whether or not that belief, that conviction remains, you got to follow the supply chain. Because if the supply chain for all the data center gear, everything related to this infrastructure, including energy, continues to accelerate and their earnings project out increases over the next 12 months, then that means demand is still there for this. And so this is like going back to, a few episodes ago when I announced that we launched SmarterX, our AI research firm. This is why, like, the story of AI is so much broader, and to understand what it means to our businesses and our own lives, we have to like understand a more holistic approach to this, which is what we try and do. As I said in the lead into this, like there's these macro trends. We're trying to help everyone understand these in a way that makes sense to you in your career, because you might hear about some earnings from some company in Taiwan and think, what does that matter? Well, it matters because it's an indicator that the big companies that we all use to do our jobs, like Google and Microsoft and OpenAI, still believe that there's massive scale ahead. It's like, okay, cool. Like the models are going to keep getting. So what it basically means is, at the end of the day, it looks like the models are going to keep getting bigger and smarter. So everything we've now talked about over the first 40 minutes here, that's what it comes down to, is all indications based on this, as we are not in a bubble, and that it's going to keep getting bigger and smarter. And then those bigger and smarter models are going to train smaller, more efficient models, and off we go.
That's an awesome analysis. And yeah, just like really emphasizing one of those points that Zuckerberg said is, not only are we probably not in a bubble, this behavior is very rational when you start unpacking it. And again, we'll see what the outcomes are. But yeah, once you really start scratching below the surface of some of this stuff, you start to see, okay, like here's exactly the thought process going into it, which I think is extremely valuable for any business owner or leader to be keeping tabs on. All right, so what's really cool is this next topic, the beginning of our rapid fire, kind of shows us how these models might be getting smarter, because Google Deepmind has achieved a significant milestone in mathematical reasoning in their latest AI systems. One is called AlphaProof, the other is called AlphaGeometry 2. These breakthrough models just demonstrated their capabilities by solving complex problems from the 2024 International Mathematical Olympiad, the IMO. It's one of the most prestigious mathematical competitions for pre-college students. These combined AI systems solved 4 out of 6 problems from this year's IMO, earning a score of 28 out of 42 possible points. Now, that puts them just shy of gold medal threshold of 29 points. So basically, the AI system is at the same level as a silver medalist in this competition. So AlphaProof, which is a reinforcement learning-based system for formal math reasoning, tackled algebra problems and one number theory problem. It also solved the hardest problem in the competition. AlphaGeometry 2 is an improved version of the geometry solving system, and it proved a geometry problem in just 19 seconds. The system's performance was evaluated by prominent mathematicians as well, and they were quite impressed with how these systems were able to actually reason through, in non-obvious ways, mathematical problems and theorems. Now, Google Deepmind sees this as a step towards a future where AI tools can actually assist mathematicians in exploring hypotheses, solving problems that have not yet been solved, and expediting the time-consuming elements of the process of solving those problems. So, Paul, like on the surface, this is about AI doing really well in a math competition, but it is so much more than that. Like, why does this breakthrough in mathematical reasoning matter so much to where AI is going?
It makes the language models smarter, more generally capable. I think that's the biggest thing, is like, we know for these models to keep getting smarter, to approach average human level, superhuman level in terms of their capabilities at cognitive work, they need more advanced reasoning capabilities, and math is a way to achieve that. And so this is all the pursuit of AGI. So again, like everything kind of comes back to, people spend so much time analyzing where we are today and what these models can do. And sometimes they lose sight of, well, what if these research labs are right and we can make these models significantly smarter, almost, skilled, expert, human level or beyond. And that's what these kinds of breakthroughs potentially lead to. So quick recap, like what does advanced reasoning logical thinking abilities do? It enhances our ability to use these models to assist in decision making, drives more complicated problem solving, helps us solve deeper problems that might require system 2 type thinking. Not a quick solution. We have to actually think through different steps, different processes. Certainly efficiency and productivity of the models in terms of applying them to regular tasks, complex projects, improved accuracy and consistency, the ability to like self-check their work is one example. Collaborative intelligence, where we're going to be working more closely with these things like we would other humans. So like if Mike and I were working on a project together, I know Mike has tons of experience and knowledge and capabilities, but I know Mike also can think logically about problems. And if I'm trying to solve a problem, I want to like work through it with someone who's a good strategist, who thinks about things, connects seemingly unconnected aspects of the problem. Like that's AIs don't do that right now. But that's where this goes, is this idea of like a true strategist, not just an assistant that does things like a limited assistant, but actually like a smart strategist. So I think this is a known area that they're all working on. They're all trying to get there. Strawberry, which we talked about from OpenAI, I think it was last week, same basic concept. And the one thing I was kind of laughing at, so when the day this came out, someone tweeted, Aiden McClaw, I don't know who this person is, but Topology AI on Twitter. So he put a chart up of the Google breakthrough in terms of like scoring on the IMO problems. And he said, OpenAI has the opportunity to do the funniest thing. And he was showing like basically at achieving gold level. Well, Sam Altman replied LOL to that. So there's definitely a part of me that thinks that, again, Sam never tweets anything that doesn't have some deeper meaning to it. My guess is whatever we see next from OpenAI probably blows these results out, or at least at minimum follows a similar trajectory and probably surpasses this outcome. But they're all working on the same basic problem.
So related to OpenAI, Sam Altman actually has just issued a stark warning about the future of artificial intelligence in a recent Washington Post opinion piece. So in this piece, Altman writes that we're at a critical juncture where the world must choose between two paths. And basically those two paths are a democratic vision for AI, led by the United States and its allies, or an authoritarian one controlled by regimes that don't share democratic values. He actually writes, quote, "There is no third option, and it's time to decide which path to take." So he points out that while the US currently leads in AI development, this position is not guaranteed because authoritarian governments, particularly China and Russia, are investing heavily to catch up and potentially overtake the West. And he warns that if these regimes win the race, they will closely guard AI's benefits and use AI to cement their own power. So Altman says to actually maintain the lead and ensure a democratic future for AI, we need to get four big things right. First, we need robust security measures to protect AI intellectual property and data. Second, we need significant investment in physical infrastructure within the US and democratic countries to support AI systems, which he believes could create a ton of jobs. He even went so far as to say, quote, "Infrastructure is destiny. It determines the direction the entire nation goes in." Now, third, he urges the development of a clear commercial diplomacy policy for AI, basically getting smart about export controls and foreign investment rules. And finally, he suggests creating new models for establishing global norms in AI development and deployment with a focus on safety and inclusivity. Now, Paul, these seem like pretty reasonable, interesting points from one of the top leaders in AI, but Sam Altman's a pretty busy guy. You could say he has a lot on his plate. Like, why am I reading this now?
So obviously the timing is intentional. I don't pretend to know why Sam does exactly what he does, but the few things that immediately came to mind for me is the elections are coming up. So, we want to start influencing how the different administrations might look at things in the United States. We're in the election cycle now. Talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Legislation at state and national levels is evolving, and at the state level moving maybe a little faster than people would want in the AI research community. Specifically was SB 1047 in California is now through like 8 rounds of revisions and seems to be gaining more and more traction. Obviously the open source movement is probably on Sam's mind. And while he's actually an advocate of open source in some ways, he does have obvious concerns about it in others. I would imagine GPT-5 is nearing release at some point here, and they're trying to kind of pave the way for what that might lead to. And then I assume they're in the process of raising historic levels of money, and whether they find a way to eventually break from their nonprofit charter and IPO, or just raise 100 billion, 500 billion, like whatever the number is, it's going to be massive. And so I think all of that is probably happening right now. And so I think we're probably going to see more editorials from Sam, probably more very public facing interviews and thoughts. So I don't know, a few episodes ago, I shared my thoughts that the U.S. government needed an Apollo level mission or beyond with AI, and not just on infrastructure. Like it is, I agree. I think keeping the infrastructure in the United States is critical to the safety and security. Ironically, Sam's the one that was rumored to be talking to other governments about moving data centers into their countries. But maybe this is his play to try and force them to keep it here, like to do what needs to be done so he doesn't have to take it somewhere else. He's probably playing both sides here. I also think the government needs to invest massively in education and training next generation of workforce. There probably needs to be some level of government subsidies. We're not going to get into Sam's universal basic income study, but we'll put a link to it in the newsletter and in the show notes. He just came out with like a 7-year study he led to basically gauge whether providing people with university income or universal basic income or stipend basically each month, how it would impact people, because that's one of his solutions when AI starts doing a lot of the knowledge work jobs that we just give people money.
Right.
I do think that at some point we're going to need something like that. There is precedent with the pandemic. The U.S. did provide money to people. They can go back and look at the data of how that impacted people, but I think that's not on the realm of possibility. I think the government needs to be looking at everything as possibilities. There's two lines I bold faced out of this, and then we'll kind of move on. I feel like this could have been a main topic for sure.
Yeah.
He called ChatGPT and other systems limited assistance, but said, and I think in the past he's called them embarrassing, like the current systems. More advances will soon follow and will usher in a decisive period in the story of human society. Now, anyone who's heard me give keynotes before, I often talk about Sam's Moore's Law for Everything blog post from March 2021. And he laid out exactly what was going to happen, and it happened. He doesn't write things like this when he's not confident that he has seen the future already. And so I would put a lot of stock in this stuff. Sam is not one that's out there using a lot of hyperbole and trying to over exaggerate. He generally has a history of previewing the future for people because he's seen it already. And I think people should take stuff like this very seriously. And then he said, we are witnessing the birth and evolution of a technology I believe to be as momentous as electricity or the internet. Sundar Pichai has echoed those words. I think fire was the one Sundar has used.
Yeah.
He said, AI can be the foundation of a new industrial base. It would be wise for our country to embrace it.
So in some other OpenAI news this past week, OpenAI's new, smaller, cheaper model, GPT-4o Mini, has now some public benchmarking results on LMSYS.org, which is a popular, credible chatbot ranking site we've talked about quite a bit. They use user feedback and reviews, as well as ELO ratings, which are used in chess, to rank the capabilities of all the major AI models out there. You can see all these in their chatbot arena at lmsys.org. And according to these ratings, GPT-4o Mini delivers, because on the leaderboard as of right now, and it can change very quickly, it is currently sitting right around the top of the leaderboard, joint with or slightly behind, depending on when you check, GPT-4o. Now, the key here is that this is while GPT-4o Mini is 20x cheaper to operate. Now, it only has about 7,000 user votes as of today. For context, GPT-4o has way more, is 65,000. It's been out longer. Others have over 100,000. So just take that with a grain of salt, but super interesting that GPT-4o Mini is already delivering, kind of, Paul, on this promise that we've talked about of more powerful intelligence that gets cheaper and cheaper over time. And that trend is really going to change things. Do you see this as an example of that starting to play out a little bit?
Yeah, and I also think GPT-4o Mini is the prelude to GPT-5. Like, if you
Mhm.
go read the announcement post from July 18th, where they say introducing our most cost-efficient small model, there's capabilities that they haven't released yet from this model. So it specifically says today GPT-4o Mini supports text and vision in the API with support for text, image, video, and audio inputs and outputs coming in the future. And then down at the bottom, it talks about like how they're basically just releasing these initial capabilities. And so I do think that there's hints when you start piecing this stuff together of what the next iteration of models will be. But I
Yeah.
do think that they're going to keep. This is what I talked about. I think it was last week where we say like, GPT-4o right now seems amazing. This stuff's gonna be like free. Like,
Yeah.
like 6 months from now, when we have the next version of this, this is the stuff where you're gonna be like, oh, that was cute. Remember GPT-4 Mini? You could like pass all these exams, and like this is the stuff they're just gonna give away, and that's weird. Like
That's
it's
unreal.
very bizarre to think about the future where this level of intelligence is one limited in Sam's words, or embarrassing in his words, and yet it's so powerful when applied to the right use cases in companies.
And like you mentioned in a previous topic, like it's kind of hard to remember. I mean, 17 months ago, GPT-4 just came out. Look how far we've come. I mean, 17 months is a long time,
Right.
but it's not that long for the innovation that we've seen.
Yeah.
All right. So, one other piece of OpenAI news this week, OpenAI has unveiled a prototype of what they're calling SearchGPT, which is an AI powered search engine. So, SearchGPT uses the GPT-4 family of models to generate responses to user queries, presenting information with real time facts in a conversational format, allowing for follow up questions. They also feature a sidebar with relevant links. This search engine also includes a visual answers feature, and OpenAI plans to eventually integrate these search capabilities directly into ChatGPT. So right now, it is just a prototype. It's available only to a small group of test users, but their approach, at least upfront from what they've demonstrated, appears to have a real emphasis on clear, prominent attribution and links to sources. And publishers will have options to manage how their content appears in search results. And this appears to be a response to some of the recent controversies with, among others, Perplexity, which is getting lambasted for not showing prominent enough attribution to the sources it's taking information from in search results. So, Paul, I guess, again, it's still very, very early, but how big a deal is this that they're previewing this right now?
We've known it was coming. I mean, this hasn't been a big secret that they were exploring search. Sam's been asked about it many times in interviews. You can sign up for a wait list. So you can go in. I don't think you can do it through a business account with ChatGPT, but you can do it through your personal account, sign up to get on the wait list. I think, initially the biggest impact is going to be if it's really good. I'd be really worried if I was Perplexity, for one.
Yeah.
Perplexity is great, but I don't know how many users it actually has. I would imagine it's in the low millions, like not probably more than 10, 20 million. I might be way off on that, but I got to guess that. ChatGPT's, who knows, 200 million users. um, and that's probably just like natively in their app. That doesn't even account for through Bing and through other platforms. So yeah, they have a distribution problem if you're Perplexity, and if
Yeah.
ChatGPT or if OpenAI nails this, then that's bad news. It's also worrisome for Google. And then it did just kind of came to my mind, like, I wonder if this is the future of Bing too. Like, what if OpenAI creates a better search to power a better knowledge assistant and agent? Does that just usurp the need to like have Bing be a standalone product? I have no idea, but I just kind of crossed my mind as a possibility.
So there's also a couple kind of major moves on AI happening at the presidential and presidential candidate level. So allies of former US President Donald Trump have drafted a sweeping executive order that could reshape the landscape of AI in the US if he is reelected. This order proposes several key initiatives, including launching a series of, quote, Manhattan projects to develop military AI technology. It involves immediately reviewing and potentially rolling back, quote, unnecessary and burdensome regulations on AI. and creating industry-led agencies to evaluate AI models and secure systems from foreign adversaries. So this kind of comes amidst a couple other important pieces of news. There's kind of this broader, it seems, political realignment going on in Silicon Valley with some major executives starting to back Trump as a candidate. That includes Elon Musk, venture capitalists like Andreessen and Ben Horowitz. It also comes amidst a broader shakeup in the presidential race, with VP Kamala Harris now the presumptive Democratic nominee after Joe Biden has declined to run again. And that's interesting as well, because Harris has been, in many ways, the administration's public face of AI in the last few years. And she played a crucial role in creating Biden's executive order on AI, which is a comprehensive order covering a ton of different aspects of safe and secure AI creation and usage in the US. And like you alluded to, Paul, it's also at a time when increasing amounts of legislation are happening at the state level too. So are you expecting AI to become like a major direct issue in the election? Obviously, it'll have a huge impact, like we've talked about, in the form of behind the scenes and with deep fakes, things like that. But are you seeing this become a major like policy pillar?
So one quick thought for everyone is this is not going to become we're not going to get into politics on this show.
All right.
There are too many tech podcasts that, in my opinion, have lost their initial value and audience because they've chosen to become political analysts. That is not going to be Mike and I. We will talk about politics to the extent that it relates to the future of artificial intelligence in business. We will not be giving you our personal opinions on politics or political leaders. That is not what you're here for. That being said, what Trump's campaign is doing is he has courted some billionaires from Silicon Valley, including Elon Musk, David Sachs, the one you didn't mention, Palmer Luckey, who, interestingly enough, was let go from Meta, believed to be, there's a little bit of both sides here, because he backed Trump in 2016. Palmer Luckey is the inventor of Oculus, so sold Oculus to Meta. He now runs a defense company called Anduril Industries. So when we talk about Manhattan projects for AI military, my guess is it's Palmer Luckey that he's listening to when it comes to that stuff. So a lot of what Trump's platform has become is whatever these billionaires want, so that they'll give him whatever the money is. So Musk originally supposedly committed $45 million a month. He then backed off and said it's not, in fact, more than $45 million a month. But prior to Harris entering the race, he was being backed by 4 or 5, Peter Thiel's another one, Silicon Valley leaders who are basically setting the AI agenda, and then it's trumpeted out, no pun intended, through Trump's platform. So that's what's happening there. Trump himself has no known opinion of AI or Bitcoin or anything. It's all just about what are these supporters want. What we know about the Biden administration that Harris is a part of is they do have an executive order. So there's actual like legislation out there about it. And ironically, they just released on July 26th, the fact sheet that gave an update on AI actions and commitments related to AI. This is because it's been 270 days since the executive order went into place. So if you want to get an update on what's going on with the current executive order, it goes into pretty great detail, including the fact that Apple just signed on with the voluntary commitment. But they talk about the different advancements that were made and how they've pretty much met all the different executive order things related to risk and safety and consumer safety and responsible AI innovation. So it's there to be read. This is a rapid fire item, so I won't get into going through the great analysis. But again, our perspective is we got to pay attention to what in the United States, what these two potential administrations think and say about AI, because it ends up affecting all of us eventually. And I'll kind of leave it at that.
All right, so we got a few more rapid fires here. Next up, AI expert Ethan Mollick, who we talk about all the time on this podcast, big fans of his work. He's put out a timely warning for companies that are building retrieval augmented generation, or RAG AI systems. This past week, he posted on LinkedIn, quote, warnings for companies building talk-tier document RAG systems with AI, which is a lot of companies. 1, no one is testing the final LLM output enough. It can be both true and misleading. There are no automated benchmarks for this. 2, no one will ever check on the primary source. Seriously, our research shows this. 3, users don't really understand them well. Among many misunderstandings, they expect the RAG system to work like a search engine, not as a flawed, forgetful analyst. 4, LLM systems are persuasive, not passive. They want to make the user happy, and they will persuade them that the results are what they wanted if they aren't. And 5, users are used to type 1 errors in search, false negatives. For instance, a document that is there wasn't found. They aren't used to type 2 errors with false positive. Details are made up that aren't there. So, Paul, like, why is he talking about this now? And why is this kind of warning important to keep in mind?
We've talked recently about this idea of precision, and large language models aren't precise. So if you're using them for a task internally that requires precision, often, data analysis is a good example. Like if
Yeah.
you're using something where you need to know the actual numbers, or, we just might publish the State of Marketing AI report last week. If we're using an LLM, like code interpreter within ChatGPT, to assist in the analysis of the data,
Right.
a human has to double check everything because they're not precise. They will make mistakes and it'll seem correct. And if you ask it, did you check your work? It'll say, yes, I'm 100% sure it's correct. Like that's how these things work. And because, go back to AI literacy, because of the lack of understanding, the lack of education and training, you just give these tools to a salesperson or a business analyst or a financial analyst, say, hey, great, we got this new system and it only looks in the 100 documents we've given it and it's great. And you don't tell them it can just make stuff up and that it might actually be wrong. And 98% of the time it's right, but the 2% of the time it's not is a massive problem for us. We're going to run into all kinds of issues of this going wrong. And now the retrieval augmented generation certainly seems to help, and it does improve the accuracy and precision, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we can just turn it over to people and have them assume it's going to be right, because for the foreseeable future, it's not.
All right. So our final rapid fire topic this week. Apple has announced that its much hyped Apple Intelligence generative AI features are going to actually be rolling out a little later than expected. Those features are now going to miss the launch of the new iPhone in September and instead begin rolling out as part of software updates coming in October, according to Bloomberg. However, Apple is actually planning to make some of these features available to developers for early testing, possibly as soon as this week. So, Paul, Apple Intelligence going to be a huge deal. We covered it when it was released at WWDC. Is this delay at all worrisome to you or indicative of anything more than just them kind of dotting the I's and crossing the T's on these products?
Probably fits in the whole precision thing we just talked about. Like, it doesn't worry me. It doesn't surprise me at all. Like, there's a lot of testing that has to go into this. So I would think by the September unveiling, they're going to have some insane previews of what this technology is going to do. And they just got to work through some stuff. I wouldn't be shocked if it gets delayed further than October, honestly.
Really?
But my feeling is that's okay. Like, we're talking about pushing AI out to billions of people through these devices. Like, let's get it right. That's going to be a lot of consumers' first known interaction where it becomes part of their daily workflows. So I want them to get it right for sure. I personally will, get my order in for new iPhone, iPad the second I can when they're going to announce this stuff. So I'm looking forward to it.
All right, a couple quick housekeeping notes before we wrap up this week. As always, you can find all the stories we talked about in this podcast, deeper dives on those, as well as some topics we didn't get to cover in our weekly newsletter. If you go to marketingaiinstitute.com/newsletter, you can sign up for This Week in AI, which is a comprehensive brief on all the news you need to know each and every week. It's a great way to make sure you don't fall behind keeping up with AI. Last but not least, if you have not left us a review on your podcast platform of choice, we would absolutely appreciate you doing so. It helps us improve the show, and it also helps us get in front of even more listeners, which is really, really helpful to spreading the message of AI literacy for all. So if you haven't given us a review yet, please, please, please take a minute to let us know how we're doing. Paul, packed week. Thanks again for unpacking it all for us.
I just realized the next episode is going to be in August. Oh my gosh. Going fast. All right. Well, we see you all in early August next week. Thanks for listening to The AI Show. Visit marketingaiinstitute.com to continue your AI learning journey and join more than 60,000 professionals and business leaders who have subscribed to the weekly newsletter, downloaded the AI blueprints, attended virtual and in-person events, taken our online AI courses, and engaged in the Slack community. Until next time, stay curious and explore AI.